Hello and welcome back to How Money Really Works. Another episode and another timing. And yeah, well, we'll explain why it's come a little bit later. But if you've been hanging on, waiting for where is Peter and Stephen to tell me about all things politics and personal finance, we're here. Yes, I'm here. And so is
Stephen Hope. Yes, I'm here as well, Peter. How the devil are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Full of busy as ever, but yeah, plenty going on. But before we crack into it, there is something very important we have to tell everybody, isn't there, Stephen?
That's right. This is financial education only. Nothing here is financial advice, our opinions. However, if you do hear anything, you think that's interesting, we always recommend you go and seek your own financial advice. Yeah, that's what we're just two lads chatting.
Just two lads chatting. So let's do some of that chatting and have a look at how money really works. So we are later coming to you this week. The reason being is that, well, I wanted to find out if I got my SpaceX shares, and then I had other jobs to do that are more important than this and actually pay for things like the house I live in and the studio I'm speaking to you from. But yes, I did get 7.5 SpaceX shares. I say I did. My wife Yen Yen did all of the legwork on it. But you know, as they say, what's hers is hers, and what's mine I get half of, or something like that. But yeah. So I have 7.5 SpaceX shares, as you said, Stephen. $2 trillion worth of company value. They've gone up already. I think we bought them at 135. They were trading at just under 190 as I came to you. So they've gone up by around a third.
How exciting.
Very, I have to say. Look,
what does it feel like to own part of a allegedly $2 trillion company?
Well, I'm going to get fitted for a monocle, and I'm going to seek out some free parking, I believe.
Yeah.
And yeah.
What does this train do? What does this car do that I can also, whatever the phrase was in this?
The line is, what does this car offer as opposed to a train? Which I could also afford.
That's correct.
Yes,
that's
if you're going to quote the philosopher that is the great Homer Simpson, do get him right, please, Steve.
Get it correct. So, yeah, that's the story that... Well, it's a story that's filling most of the headlines for retail investors. That's not to be kind of detrimental to somebody who's a retail investor. It's a news story. It's anything to do with Elon Musk is a news story. Yeah, where do you want to start? I mean, I'm like ever. I'm not. Like I've said before, I'm not a stock picker. That's not what I do. I'm all about diversification and don't have all your eggs in one basket. However, if you want to make a lot of money, sometimes you need to take a punt on something. And a lot of people seem interested in this particular punt in the nicest possible way.
Punt, sometimes the right word. Well, certainly sounds like the right word when talking about Elon Musk, of course. A controversial figure. Certainly you can say that about him, but certainly box office nonetheless. It's absolutely the reason why me and my wife and our friends over here, we sought out the German banks that will step in as a broker in order to buy US shares to do this. So I mean, look, the questions that we have to look at really, is SpaceX overvalued? Almost certainly. Is Britain undervalued? In terms of, we looked at the combined value of the FTSE 100, almost certainly when you look at some of the things on there, some of the names on there. How does this portray the UK economy? Hard to see it going beyond the stagnation that we've heard all about. And yeah, is America doing better than us? I know the numbers all seem to be pointing that way. It's a strange one, America, at the moment. Obviously, with the World Cup going on in the US, Canada and Mexico at the moment, people in my game and in journalism are pumping out the stories about, isn't it terrible going over to America? But then later on, in the business stories, we're hearing about the only success stories on the markets and the only success stories, certainly in the West, coming out of US companies. So we'll have a little look into that as well.
What shall we start with, Pete?
Is SpaceX overvalued, Stephen?
I mean, I don't know. Possibly. I mean, if you think about, if we start from the beginning or close to the beginning, why not? So, what is an IPO? What is it? What's just happened with SpaceX? And I suppose for people who aren't massively into stuff, what on earth is SpaceX? So, I'm trying to unravel some of this. If we start from what it is, my take on it is back in the mid 2000s, Elon Musk started his own private company because have you seen his t-shirts? Occupy Mars. That's his thing.
Mhm.
He wants to fire rockets beyond to the moon and beyond. So he started his own kind of private company. And then over the years, so Tesla is separate altogether. That's really important. So Tesla and his shares over there is a completely separate entity. Then he bought well no, that didn't come first. Then he had Starlink, which is and my dad's got this, he's the treasurer of the golf club at Wayside Golf Club. Shout out to Big Gary. So he's actually swapped out the broadband in the Wayside Golf Course to Starlink because it was terrible internet connection. So these kind of satellites up in space getting 5G kind of speeds. That, it would appear, is the pretty much the only part of this company that makes any money.
Mm.
That's the part that makes money. And then he decided he wanted to buy Twitter and on now X. So he gave equity against his Tesla shares to buy Twitter. But the people who gave him the money against that never had no cash change hands. So effectively what we've got here, as far as I can kind of unravel it, this is my simplistic way, is it's kind of a hodgepodge of different companies badged together, and it's now called SpaceX. But
Mm.
it's operating at, if when I said that the only part of the company that's actually making any money is Starlink and the satellites and the Wi-Fi, that type of stuff. It's actually operating at 100 times its revenue. So you need to it's going to take 100 years for it to be worth what you reckon it's worth. So there's an awful lot of speculation going on there in terms of the Elon Musk premium, the fact that I think a lot of people use you as an example, Pete. So you're just nodding along when Yen Yen saying this is a good idea.
Right. Well, okay. I came at it from a slightly different view, but Yen Yen has tried for a while to get me interested in these type of things. And that's why we are starting the whole Pete's portfolio thing that we'll be on starting properly in the next episode as a segment. We are going to be joined by Professor Uli Bruckner from Stanford University. So if he's good enough for Stanford and everybody who's paid, 65 grand a year, I believe, this time around to go there, I'm sure he's good enough to fill us in a little
Yeah.
bit on how money really works and how an idiot like myself can invest. But what I approached SpaceX in particular when Yen Yen brought it up that she was going to be looking at it was what drew me in is I actually spent quite a few years as a space correspondent, as a space cadet, some said.
Uh,
But no, I spent a few
yeah.
years covering rocket launches out of Baikonur and from a time when I was a correspondent based in Moscow in Star City there, so working very closely with Roscosmos, with NASA, with ESA, the European Space Agency. So I've seen the tech that they've been using for as long as they've been using it. Now I haven't been a space correspondent for 13 years, so yeah, don't quote me on how up to date some of my eyes on knowledge is. But there is not a way to carry out the missions that we as a human race, we have slated just to keep things maintained without SpaceX.
Mhm.
Being able to send those rockets up there and have them return and be reusable, there is only really SpaceX and probably China manned spaceflight who have that type of capacity, capability, and obviously in the example of SpaceX, they're actually using them right now. That's actually happening. If promises that have been made by the president of the United States that he wants a base on the moon, he wants us going towards Mars. I was speaking to DLR. That's not the Docklands Light Railway over here in Germany. That's basically it's German Aerospace Association, and they're the equivalent of NASA for Germany, who work within the European Space Agency. Now, I was trying to put them on the spot a couple of days ago to say, you don't have this technology. You do have the experience of putting astronauts in space. Are you looking to partner with either SpaceX as a private company or China manned spaceflight as a national entity in order to trade off your astronaut training with their rocket capabilities, or in the case of SpaceX, how it would work there, because obviously SpaceX doesn't have its own astronauts. The spokesperson said, look, I don't want to talk about SpaceX, but the idea was, and from speaking to him afterwards, was they know it's the only viable option at the moment, because if we are going to go to the moon and then onto Mars, we need reusable rockets that we can have them come back, put another capsule on it and launch that up.
I mean,
Space,
yeah,
SpaceX is the only way in the West.
yeah, I mean that stuff in terms of the company, people would be listening to me as well. Actually, you're like, why are we going to go to Mars? What? But in the short term, the play I think is more around data centers. So the more I read about this, that everything to do with AI, everything to do with how much power it consumes, it would appear that SpaceX's technology has the ability to put these data centers in space, and it's got
Yes.
unlimited power because they'll just put loads of solar panels on it, and space tends to have a lot of space and then an awful lot of UV light from the sun all of the time as it goes around. So that sounds like years and years in the future. Clearly, so when you texted me the other night, was it a few days before? Like, you didn't actually ask, "Am I buying any?" You were like, "I'm getting some." And bear in mind, financial education, not financial advice. I wasn't giving you financial education or advice. The
No.
My good feeling is if we move forwards in 10 years' time, we'll see the initial release of the shares, the IPO price, and go, "Wasn't that a bargain?
Mm-hmm.
Look what it's done." Um, But it depends, like ever, at the risk of sounding like a financial advisor, it's all to do with your time horizon, Peter. How long are we investing for? If somebody's investing and they want to turn a quick buck, well, actually, you've already made a third. So what is your number? There'll be people trading. I go, I've spent, put £10,000 in, an awful lot of money, £10,000, and I've made 3,000. I'll take that, and I've made the money. I could foresee in the next 3 months, 6 months, and actually 180 days is an interesting time, Pete. The people, remember I said about 10 minutes ago, 5 minutes ago, about the guys who helped Elon Musk buy Twitter or X.
Mm-hmm.
So they were given share options, and their shares for what you bought in X are now part of SpaceX. They can't sell their shares for 180 days. But if you've been given, and this is people who even worked at SpaceX. I was reading a story about a guy, almost like a handyman who worked at SpaceX, who was given like 10,000 shares or something as part of the employee scheme. So this guy, this American Mexican kind of handyman is sitting on kind of paper profits of £50 million,
Mm.
$50 million. What do you think he's going to do on the 180th day?
Oh, sell, 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 sell.
Right. So at that point, there'll be more shares on the market, a potential fall, and then the reaction of retail investors, if they see things going down, they tend to make that initial reaction as well, and it then becomes self-fulfilling. Even that would be an easy word to say. Um, so I can see an awful lot of volatility in the next kind of 3 to 6 months, and therefore probably an opportunity not to buy low, sell high, but drip feed money in. Shall we talk about that? How that works?
Yeah, well, what I wanted to do is say about the Tesla comparison that you've made. So I have these 7.5 SpaceX shares that were bought at the original valuation when it was available to us. Now, if I'd bought back in 2010, 7.5 shares in Tesla at the IPO value, that would have been at $1.13 a share. So 7.5 shares would have cost me $8.50. Today, those shares are worth over $400 a go, meaning that my investment of less than, well, probably get a pint and a packet of crisps in Sunderland. Not you wouldn't get much in Berlin, but yeah, my investment of around the price of a pint and a packet of crisps would be worth over $3,000 today. So that's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping that I can sit on these for a long time and they're just going to grow in value. But exactly what you said about if it hits a certain amount, will we sell? I'm sure we will. And this is where I start saying we and not me. because this is when my wife sees that it's hit a certain price, almost certainly she'll sell some, if not all of them. I know she has a plan for that. But yeah, so it's
On that example though, Pete, and
yeah.
I'll be the yin to your yang. You're totally correct. There's lots of these initial IPOs. You can talk about Facebook when it was Facebook, Meta now. You can if you bought Google, all of these examples, but there's also history littered of ones that haven't worked out very well, using exactly the same math as well. So I think it was 2000, right down to 2019, Virgin Galactic, share price $10, $12. Now there is none. So there is the potential to actually lose everything when you buy individual shares. And then
Mm.
another big one that was around at the same time, just before the pandemic, I think WeWork.
Oh yeah.
These kind of leased buildings everywhere. That was the future. But of course, at this stage, not as many people go to offices anymore. And if you bought at the initial purchase order, you might you probably will never get your money back. So the idea with buying individual shares like this is form a part of a wider portfolio. Some will go well, some of them won't. But also, I was going to suggest that one thing for individual investors to consider doing is drip feeding. So financial education, not financial advice. Um, in America, it's called dollar cost averaging. In the UK, it's called pound cost averaging. So the idea, if you just drip feed money into the market, it could be an individual share. It's a bit more difficult because you're buying fractions. But in the UK, the example would be kind of into your ISA or your pension. So
Mm.
you can drip feed 100, 200, £500, 50 quid, whatever it might be a month. And as the market's moving around, Del Boy would say buy low, sell high. Well, as the market's fluctuating, if your fixed amount of money's going in every single month, as the market is ebbing and flowing, you're buying cheaper shares when there's some bad news, and the cheaper shares you bought when there was bad news, as in when we did this 6 weeks ago to do with the Iran war, that period of time, if you fixed amount of money went into that investment, the shares you bought at $1 because it was on sale are now worth $2, and you've actually increased the investment. So I think that's one way to kind of mitigate around volatility is the discipline to do things regularly, drip feeding in, constant, consistent, boring. But that way you can buy bits and pieces of things like SpaceX, but still ride out the storm as well. God, I'm a dull financial advisor. Just
No,
buy
it's
something and sell it.
no, yeah, you are completely right, because the way I've looked at this, and this is not the way we've gone into it. As I said, my wife does have a plan, but the way I'm looking at this is like, oh, is this the new shiny thing? I need to be a part of that. In how much of that, whether you like him, dislike him, or are fairly indifferent towards him politically and how he speaks publicly, how much of that wow factor and that box office draw of SpaceX, X, Tesla, and also Starlink, of course, as well, a fantastic bit of kit. For anybody involved in doing outside broadcasts from the middle of nowhere, it's completely revolutionized how we do my job in live broadcast. But how much of that comes down to Elon Musk and who he is as a person and the draw he has? And that's where I think SpaceX and all the rest of Musk's companies differ from Virgin Atlantic or from WeWork, because Virgin Atlantic, even though it was Virgin Galactic, I beg your pardon, I got the name wrong, even though it was talking about space flight and things like that, they didn't have functioning anything to be able to show. Now, SpaceX is the go-to for NASA now.
Yeah.
So it's a bit different with that. And then in terms of WeWork, well, I think they were a flash in the pan they were of a time, and it's no longer that time. But talent goes to Elon Musk. Capital goes towards Elon Musk. The media follow Elon Musk. And therefore, because of all of those, investors will stick their money there. Now,
Well, we said before about the Elon premium. You're right. It's the cult of personality to a certain extent, and then cold hard cash when it comes to institutions. If you're talking about huge, big fund managers and kind of private banks and stuff, yeah, they'll be there. They'll be to be dazzled by him and the fact that he's got a bit of a Midas, not a bit of a Midas touch, he has got a Midas touch from almost everything he's ever touched. But the question that I had in terms of the short-term volatility is around, was Elon just being super generous to say, we're going to make at least a third of these shares available to the good people of the world so they can all become as rich as I am?
No.
Or might it be that Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs said, what, you think it's worth 2 trillion? And they open it up and say there's just like grok and like a few other things inside of there. So ultimately, the the phrase rug pull gets used quite a bit pejoratively in terms of a lot of kind of Instagram and TikTok kind of financial people. It's not that. There is a real business that will become massive for humanity, but only invest in things that if you're prepared for the volatility to go with it, right? So that's my position. I'm thinking there might be an opportunity in the next kind of 3-6 months to get in. I might be wrong about getting below the IPO price, but there was also a big rush as well, right? So once everybody wants to do it, by the time, what's the phrase? By the time the shoe shine boy's giving you tips, the moment's already kind of passed. So I think the numbers are mad as well, though. I think nowadays, I think we just trip out the word trillion or billion. Like it's just like nothing. So what
Well,
I'll write down.
Stephen, I
Yeah.
can tell you one thing on that while you look for what you were looking for. When I'm doing business stories, you'll notice this when you watch the news. Every reporter, every correspondent has them. They have points in which they say something where it allows them to think how they get on to the next bit. So usually one of the ones I would use is if I give a figure and I would say something like, I don't know, Friedrich Merz has set aside or Friedrich Merz needs to find another €5 billion, $5 billion in order to bridge the gap to do this. That's and that's billion with a B, to know to say, well, that's kind of, it's small fry now, isn't it? Because, well, yeah, we're into talking about trillions.
Well,
And I'm,
the world's first
when we
trillionaire.
start talking about trillions, I'm out of fingers and toes to count on.
Yeah. So I've written this down. I have to admit that I've used ChatGPT. If you counted to 1 million at one number per second, it would take you 12 days to do that. Be a boring 12 days, but you could just about do it. If you had
Relaxing.
exactly the same thing to count to 1 billion, it would take 31 years. It's a very long time. To do the same thing to count to 1 trillion, it will take 31,700 years. So they're
Well, I'm
putting
not doing that.
Well, no, we're not. None of us are going to be doing that. And I took a screenshot of this as well earlier. So we've heard of my mate Warren Buffett. He's 90 odd.
Yep.
For a period, he was the world's richest man. In fairness to him, he keeps like giving money away. So his company couldn't be any less like SpaceX. Oh, there's a little bit in terms of a conglomerate of lots of different companies, but he buys brands and keeps them for a very long time. Coca-Cola, McDonald's, that his thing is buy brands. So Warren Buffett, one of the greatest investors of our generation, and is estimated to be the 11th richest man in the world. So he spent 70 years doing his stuff, and he's worth 146 billion.
So he
Elon
knows a
Musk.
thing or two about a thing or two.
Yeah, so he's 90-year-old, he's been investing for 70 years and he's worth 146 billion. So I wouldn't mind being a couple of quid behind him.
No?
Yesterday, Elon Musk's net worth increased by 145 billion. So to put in perspective, these numbers get tripped out. It's absolutely mental. And so it's either going to be proved to be totally correct and it's just going to be, pardon the pun, like a rocket, or something will blow up at some point, and you've just got to be prepared for the rocky ride that goes with that for a period. So yeah, I think in 5 years it'll look cheap. In 5 weeks you might get a bit of a shock. It depends how much volatility you're prepared for.
Another question for you on this. If we get into the I talked a little bit about the X factor, the
Mhm.
star quality. If Elon decided tomorrow, I've had enough of all of this. I'm sick of making a fool of myself, jumping around, dancing in ill-fitting t-shirts at launches. I'm gonna go away, take myself away, and write the great South African American novel. And he sells up everything and he leaves. Without Elon Musk, does SpaceX, Tesla, everything else, does it crash? Does it fall? Does it still produce the same product? As I said, when it comes to the Starlink, which is the only one I've got any real experience with of using regularly, it is a very, very good piece of kit. Teslas seem to do the job that they're meant to do and incredibly popular. And obviously, if space agencies are using his rockets, they're going to have a certain capability level and basically are the best thing on the market right now. So if he steps back from it, they still have all of those things, but do they get the media attention? Does the talent that is going to these companies right now continue to go? One of the reasons that they're going there is, it doesn't seem like it's the normal way that they're used to doing this type of work. It's a lot more freedom in some ways given to the creative side of engineering and design. But also, you mentioned the janitor getting enough shares to make him, a millionaire multiple times 10 over. All of the designers, engineers, even the welders and everybody that makes the things in the end have also got rich like that. That's only going to make more people want to go and work for them, what is already an incredibly competitive marketplace to get in there. So you've already got the best of the best wanting to work for them. If they now realize, well, hang on, not only are we going to get a great job with a great career that is going to make us wealthy over the years, there is every chance we might get a big old pot of gold land in our laps along the way. So, of course, it would seem like a no-brainer, really, if you were a rocket scientist to be having your. What do you do? Do you post off a CV and a covering letter?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but to be fair, you want it to be memorable. Perhaps you've got to send it via drone or something that you've invented or you've
Yeah,
created
I'm
yourself.
sure flying a drone with a letter attached to it will
Yeah,
do really well flying towards wherever Elon lives.
an owl. Well, you started that.
An owl. Send an owl. Let's do that. I like that better. Like Harry Potter. Send
Yeah.
an owl
So
over to them.
you started that question, and my mind went somewhere else. Actually, generally happens when you start talking, Peter. But to take the world's first trillionaire and then to try to bring it back to just little old anybody with a business. Have I ever told you my Jesus nut story?
Have you told us your Jesus nut story? No.
I'm now going to take you back to Vietnam. So
Okay.
imagine, so Jesus isn't there because that would be, well, he might have been. So you're flying across the Viet Cong and you got your in your chopper. I always picture a kind of like the beginning of the A-team. That's how I picture when people are in Vietnam.
You went helicopter, you went Vietnam, and you went A-team and not
Yes.
Apocalypse Now, Flight of the Valkyries.
No, I'd
No.
say. So yes, A-team. You're flying across Vietnam, and I've had this verified now by somebody who happens to work in the RAF, and he flew helicopters. So the top propeller spinny blade. This will work if we're on video, but not very much if we're on the app, the Spotify. I'm spinning my hand around. The very top nut on the are the propellers chopper blade.
Propellers, chopper
Yeah,
blades, yeah.
all of the science, everything that goes with it. It's actually hand tied because it's got to be loose enough to spin round. And it's called a Jesus nut because if you're flying across Vietnam and that nut falls off, which from time to time it did, well, you might as well just shout for Jesus because you haven't got, there's not much else you can do. So the Jesus nut analogy, spinning this right back around to Elon Musk, what would happen if he chose to leave? I don't think he can choose to leave because he's probably got so many, he can't leave. But what would happen if he wasn't around? As in, he couldn't perform the role anymore, or he died, or he had serious illness, or something like that. So back to normal people in normal businesses, we talk about this all the time. If you are the Jesus nut in your business, what effect would that have to the longevity, the success of the business? That's called key person insurance. Who's the key person in the business? And undoubtedly, based upon your description, Elon Musk definitely is the key person in SpaceX and in Tesla. But that could be applicable to anybody, whether you're a joiner, a welder, financial advisor. What would happen to your business if you weren't there? And how that gets factored into the market, where what would happen if Elon Musk died? I mean, yeah, you should really take a life insurance policy out on his life just to protect your investment, because if that did happen, I think it'd be interesting times in the market in general, I think.
And Elon, if you're interested in checking on your pension provisions, you can, of course, send Stephen an email. He'll probably answer you if you message him directly on X, or even if you're willing to go to one of your competitors, anything through Meta. Just pop in. I'm sure he'll make you a cup of tea as well. You'll stretch you a biscuit even as well, won't you?
did I finish that section on what happens if Elon Musk dies? I like to
You
keep things high and light,
you
Peter.
kind of did, and then I had him popping around to sort out his pension with
Yeah.
you. But yeah, look, you can say that about a lot of the other real big CEOs, the ones that people can name, the ones people can even identify if they're shown a picture of them. I'm thinking your Bill Gateses, your Steve Jobses. You mentioned them, Warren Buffett, and
You're talking to
the
your Hwangs.
your Jensen
Yeah.
Huang, who, of course, I will never forget what he looks like now after I was sent to interview him. Oh, God, not so long ago, in fact, for me not being able to pick him out of a crowd. And I asked, very nice guy in a leather jacket, if he could tell me where the boss of NVIDIA was, because I was supposed to try and grab him for an interview. Yeah,
So
he was very, very, very charming and polite about the whole thing and didn't make it an issue. But yeah, interesting chap. I now will never forget who Jensen Huang is. But yeah, so these people have had direct impacts upon company valuation. They can say things that will lower a stock price. They can also say things that will raise them. How does Elon Musk fit into that pantheon? Because you've already said that Warren Buffett's basically entire net worth, Elon gained in a day.
that's
So
meant that's
how does he fit into that pantheon of the big CEOs, or is he in a league of his own, really?
yeah. Well, I think but again, just my views. He's in a league of his own. Mainly because he's kind of contrarian as well. Like he'll say it's just crazy stuff, right? So he'll I don't whatever you do, don't buy SpaceX shares. That's a terrible idea. Yeah, don't do that. Like say there's not many people he will say that. He said that about X, he said that about Tesla. He'll say something contrarian, but by the same token, he'll then whatever he ultimately he has delivered. Um so you probably would put him in a kind of a league of his own. But he's up there with his pal Donald Trump as well in terms of a different way of kind of self promotion. Um, and of course, I'm not cynical at all, Peter. But in terms of you're talking about things that people can say who've got control of the media's ear, who can control just with a single tweet or a single truth, whatever they call it on Truth Social, what happened to the market and the share price. And you're talking about Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and I think you're right now, Jensen Huang, in terms of Nvidia, the size of them, probably now he can say things and the market will listen, regardless of whether it's true or not. I suppose it's just kind of if there's enough momentum. Um, but it's in interesting times, and it's just I think the difference between now. Please don't replay this back in 5 years' time. The difference between now and like the .com bubble, which everybody kind of harks back to, is when petsupermarket.com floated. And then they opened up and went, that's a really good, what a brilliant name for a website. What do you do? Oh, no, we don't do anything. We're just kind of in my mum's garage. So there was no profit. There was nothing there. The difference now is no matter who we're talking about, whether it's SpaceX, Nvidia, or any of the other big tech firms, they're already generating big profits. It's just whether they're generating profits big enough to justify the current price tag today. It'll get there over time, but when you're buying a share price and he's worth 2 trillion, well, is it really? Because if he wasn't there, you can't really sell it because he'd have to leave as well. So interesting times, Peter. It's gonna be my catchphrase. That interesting times. So you've been to the air show this week, Peter. Is that right?
I did. I had a lovely time.
Yeah.
Me and the cameraman going around there at, near the airport here in Berlin. What was more interesting about it, though, was that we were there filming on the day when a lot of defence contractors were particularly trying to hawk their wares to governments. And when you see some of the wares, you would hope only governments could buy them, because we're talking about things like the F-35 fighter jet, Apache helicopters, the German manufactured version of Patriot missile batteries, all of these type of things. What was most concerning about it was just how many representatives of defence ministries from Europe, as well as other countries, but I'm looking at the European ones as a Europe correspondent, how many deals were being done, how
Oh,
many of these big boomsticks are being purchased, it looks like, based on what we're hearing coming out of the MOD in the UK, what we've heard coming out of the Defense Ministry here in Berlin, that there is a real charge to up spending on defense because of perceived risks from around the world. Now, there's also the, I'm going to say, tardiness charge that comes in for the peacetime dividend that was granted to particularly governments in the UK, where the the defense sector was allowed to absolutely be whittled away. The armed forces were allowed to be whittled away, while the defense sector, I should have said, made a lot of money with companies like BAE Systems and the rest of them, Land Rover as well, Rolls-Royce, making huge profits. They say in that defense spending review that came out that they're short by, how much is it? About £5 billion
well, no, well,
that
I
they
read it.
need?
Yeah, well, I read it that this is the UK anyway. That the reason why the defence secretary resigned, and somebody's name I might hear it again. Al Khan's this very big
Yes.
Scottish man who looks like a hard man, kind of potential leader. Couldn't be any more out of an antithesis of Keir Starmer. He resigned as well. 29 billion was the number that I heard that that there was needed. And that's per year. So we've done that
Yeah,
again.
okay. So that's so it's probably 5 billion a year that, or thereabouts, that I was looking at. So they're looking
Yeah,
at 29 billion that they need to
that's what they
find.
need. And then they resigned for the fact that basically what they got was like nowhere near enough. So yeah,
Mm.
it's kind of embarrassing from my perspective that we're talking the first half of the first half of our podcast about trillionaires, billionaires, and like money doesn't matter, and then we're going, oh, but we can't scrape our version of £5 billion together to keep the country safe. It doesn't fill you with an awful lot of confidence, really, from my
It
side.
it doesn't, but then if you look at, and obviously John Healey deciding he had to do what he was going to do and step down, just as Al Khan's, as you've said, has done the same thing. Now, he's an interesting one, isn't he? You did
Mm.
mention saying you think he might go forward as leader. By the time we come back, the Makerfield by-election will have happened, and we'll know if the King in the North is a viable contender to Keir Starmer, if Andy Burnham wins that seat. I do think now he will. However, there's still plenty of time left. So by the time we come back, that's probably what we'll be talking about. But yes, should we go to the Labour leadership election that we are all expecting is just a matter of time as opposed to if it will come? I wouldn't bet Al Khan's running against Andy Burnham. I don't think he would get enough of a percentage of the PLP to be able to be.
It might be the other way around, like, so if for whatever reason Burnham doesn't win and the leadership, like, it's already been, the starting pistol's already been taken. If there's no Burnham and then it's Starmer against Streeting against, and then actually I think this Al Khan's, for those who are listening, sorry, they don't know, X kind of, well, he doesn't really say what he's X. He sounds like he was pretty high up in some kind of like SAS type secret mission, special boat service or something.
Yeah, as far as I understand, he was a Royal Marine that then progressed to other more elite sections of
Jack
the
Bauer.
armed
He's Jack
forces.
Bauer,
He's,
basically.
he's Scottish Jack Bauer.
He's a Jack Bauer. He's who's the other one that I like? Jim off The Office plays him on Tom Clancy's book. What's he called?
Jack Ryan. You're thinking of Jack Ryan. There we go. Also excellently portrayed, of course, by Alec Baldwin, Harrison Ford, Ben Affleck, Chris Pine, and John, whose last name I'm not going to try because I haven't said it before. Krasinski, I believe. Anyway,
Jim from The Office. But
there
then I
you go.
realised when I was talking, actually, the character himself wasn't. He was more of an analyst that became. We'll stick with Jack Bauer.
Okay.
Essentially, in terms of juxtaposition, another good word for a Tuesday morning, I think if Burnham doesn't win, and then nobody really knows, he's not high profile, if there's some kind of leadership debate and there's like a 6'4" kind of military hard man, I think that could be quite an interesting thing. But we got on to defence spending. Yeah, for me, well, you can answer this as well, Pete, or try to. If we keep saying we're preparing for a potential war with Russia by 2031, I've heard this thing being mentioned. How do you prepare for something with a fixed like it's a World Cup in 4 years' time. Surely, if there was going to be a war, they might just do it a bit sooner. I should, or it's because they've got to spend this money to get in a position where if if there was going to be one, we're slightly prepared. Is that kind of where we're at? That they're just so far behind.
Well, World Cups are prepared for in various different ways, and there's always stories about how the money isn't being spent right, or it's too much money, or it's costing too much. It's not that dissimilar, especially when you factor in elements of corruption as well. But the so the event that I was at the air show, where I said, we've got representatives of ministries of defense from around the world there. They're looking at buying fighter jets that no chance they're getting delivered within the next 2 years. Other bits of hardware, they're no chance going to get before the next 5 years. And if they're talking about a potential conflict in 2030, 2031, it does seem that it's that kit that they're buying for. However, they're buying kit now that is technology from a few years ago that they're going to get in the future, which is all very expensive kit. You're talking hundreds of millions for individual items of this type of kit that were on sale that they are looking to replenish stocks of. So these are things like your primary fighter jet, your main battle tank, your main air defense system. But they're going to be coming up against drones that cost hundreds of dollars to make. We're already seeing in the Ukraine conflict, and we've already seen in the conflict between Iran, Israel, and the United States, and the fallout into the Gulf states there, that if you're shooting Patriot missiles at $100 drones, you're spending millions and millions and millions for. I mean, it's a lot of bucks for very limited bang. So that's where I would be a little concerned with how they go about doing it. However, as you said, is it a case of we've just fallen so far behind? Certainly when you speak to people involved in divvying up what resources go to what parts of the military, if they had to be called on in order to be deployed, yeah, they need to shake something up, because what we saw from the British perspective is when the US and Israel attacked Iran, and the Gulf of Hormuz got closed down, and Cyprus came under attack, and the RAF base there came under attack. The response from the UK opened a lot of people's eyes, I think,
Yeah.
of how slow it was. So something does need to be done. But the problem, I do think, coming down the track is that the systems and methods in which we have in place in order to procure the equipment that we need is based on a system that no longer reflects the reality of combat.
Is it equivalent of saying World War One to World War Two? We're going to dig a trench versus we're going to have aeroplanes, and now again back to the Simpsons. The future wars are going to be fought on top of very tall mountains of space with small robots. Is that kind of that's basically where we're going to go to?
And your responsibility will be to maintain and operate those robots. Yes, it is quite similar in some ways to that quote, and it did come into my head about 7 times as I was walking around the unmanned aerial vehicle section of the Berlin Air Show. Look, something has to be done, and something has to be seen to be done. And if that is, we've got to pump a whole load of cash at defence, which, even if you're not happy with what Keir Starmer's government's done with the defence spending review, it still does pump a lot more money into the defence budget. I believe the chap who has the unenviable position of taking over as defence minister right now, I believe one of his colleagues was on the radio last night saying that even if it went through today, as it is, it's still around £11 billion a year higher, the defence budget, the next one will be, than it was under the last budget of the Conservative Party. So they're trying to say, and this is even those that are loyal to Keir Starmer, that we are trying to do something and we are trying to put that across. However, that doesn't get over the problem that the people who are going to be using this kit on the ground are saying, we need more of it, we need it sooner, and we need different kit to what we've been getting. We need stuff that's up to date with what we're using. Because, I mean, I haven't been to one in a while, but every now and again, the press get invited to NATO war games whenever they take place, usually up in the Baltic states. And the last one I was at, there was a group from Ukraine, that were taking part in a drone warfare drill scenario against, I believe it was Estonian and British troops. Well, obviously they're using these drones day in, day out in an
Mhm.
active conflict. Well, they absolutely wiped the floor with the Brits and the Estonians. It wasn't a contest. So it can be all well and good to say we're going to spend and spend and spend, but it's what we spend on. Are we expecting to fight a conventional war against Russia? Absolutely not. That's not going to happen. I mean, we're not going to be digging trenches on the banks of the Oder here in Germany, which is the border with Poland, or even further going over and digging trenches near to Krakow in Poland to stop an invasion. I can't see that happening. However, do we need in Britain to have a defence capability that can look out for the challenges of today? Absolutely.
But presumably
Every
that
nation
doesn't
needs that.
yeah, but presumably that's the part that doesn't you don't need to go and spend 2 billion on new planes, but if you spent £10 billion on AI and anti kind of cyber or cyber
Mm.
attack, that would seem well. I mean, to be fair, the issue here from the political angle is we haven't really got the stomach to either pay more tax or cut things to pay for it. So,
And I can tell you the photo op for signing off on a deal for new fighter jets, that gets the likes of me there, because
mhm,
everybody likes that picture that we saw this week that we were filming just recently of Boris Pistorius, the German defense minister, sitting, waving from the canopy of the cockpit
yeah,
of an F-35. That's a great shot. We're going to spend billions and billions on AI.
yeah,
What, is he going to be stood in front of a server? How do
mhm.
you make that announcement? So that's definitely a big part of it. What you touched on there is the more crucial bit, though. Obviously, if you're going to spend more on one side, you need to remove funding from another. This brings us back to pensions, doesn't it, Stephen?
Yeah, I mean,
Because it's
we've been talking for an hour, probably haven't got time for that. But yes, there would appear to be some relatively they're not easy wins, but in terms of the government spreadsheet, there's certain bits where you're like, they must just look at it and go, "Oh, I can't go anywhere near that. That's too big of a problem." Um, Pensions, triple lock. Oh no, the old people vote. No, that's no good. We don't like that. So I think all that must be going on the whole time. These political choices, and probably we do need. It would appear we do need a change or any direction with somebody with some kind of leadership and prepared to take some big calls. And if Andy Burnham's prepared to do that, getting 2 weeks, 3 weeks ahead of ourselves here, then some shaking things up is what's needed because the stasis that we've got at the moment just is. It frightened me. We're talking about Donald Trump, Elon Musk being $155 billion better off in a day, and the entire country of Great Britain in Northern Ireland can't find 5 billion to keep the defence secretary. It's a bit depressing, isn't it? It is to me. I just think that's like spend it.
it is depressing, but it is the reality of where Britain finds itself. It isn't solely the fault of Keir Starmer's government. It just falls to Keir Starmer at the head of this government to deal with the situation, as it always does with prime ministers. However, is there a case that the people, citizens, brothers, sisters, lend me no, that people weren't correctly educated about the state pension? Because one of the things that I realise now is when I speak to my own family about this, who quite a lot are of pensionable age, if not, they're not there already, about to get there. And they say, well, I paid in, Bonnie lad. I can't get rid of this. And then you try and explain, actually, you didn't pay in. It's not that type of system. What you did is you paid the pensions of people that were drawing their pensions in the 1970s, 1960s to an extent, and in the 80s and 90s.
I
That
talk about
certainly that hasn't been articulated to
well,
people who are drawing it down. And it's incredibly important because at some point, and I thoroughly believe it will be at a point where there's no other option, whoever sits in 10 Downing Street is going to have to go, get them in next door from 11. We're going to get the Chancellor in. We've got to work out how we do this. How do we get rid of the triple lock and replace it with something that functions? Because if they don't, the country's cooked.
I mean,
But I'm also well aware. I'm also well aware that whatever politician does that, that's them done.
yeah.
I can
So
guarantee you, they're finished.
the argument makes sense, and I always thought Jimmy in 1903, he's been working down the mines, and he's just about to get carted off, and presumably at the time just kind of put onto a literal scrap heap. And went, oh no, we're gonna give you a pension. But I've never paid into it. Oh, don't worry, because there's 10 of us and there's one Jimmy. So for the 9 of us who are working, we're all going to pay a bit in so you can get a pension, Jimmy. And that worked perfectly well until we're now at a stage, and don't quote us on this, but we're almost there. Something like, especially when you factor in what's the phrase they use now, Peter? Non-active workers, so people who potentially aren't retired, but
Meats. Oh no, sorry, that's the
no.
other end of the scale. Yeah.
Well, basically non-economically active. So basically somebody
Okay.
who's 50 who isn't at work, isn't retired either. But effectively, we're now almost at 50-50. 50% of the country paying for 50% of the country who either don't work because they're retired or can't work because of various benefits. Therefore, that balance just doesn't work. So when you're talking about when do we fix things, even reform, they're guaranteeing the triple lock. So they're not. That's something they're not kind of looking at in terms of
Yeah,
changing.
but politically, they can't do anything about that. What, they're at 20-something% right now. They're always going to be polling well, but the moment they say, "Yeah, this needs looking at," it's slightly Potemkin village. A lot of the promises in the reforms manifesto. It doesn't exist as a manifesto yet, but the plans that are there. Some of them will look solid from the outside, but I wouldn't knock on any of those walls. And there's no way at this point in time that Nigel Farage is ever going to go, yeah, get me in there, and I'm going to make sure you all have to get private pensions from some of my mates.
Yeah, it's all a bit kind of depressing is the word I'm looking for. There's some big choices need to be made, and not very many people out there prepared to articulate what they're offering at the
Yep.
moment, and that's where we're at.
But at some point, and it's going to be coming to a head very soon, people are going to have to say which way they stand. Well, most importantly, probably, who is going to challenge the Prime Minister, because it does seem like somebody is, and they're going to do it very, very soon. By the time we come back next, we'll know if Andy Burnham won in Makerfield. Of course, we'll be talking all about that, any of the ramifications that come out of that, what Andy has to say now. Well, this is, of course, if he wins, what Andy Burnham has to say now about some of the things he said in the past, particularly regarding bond markets and other things that could have a big impact on Britain's finances, and then knock on to your finances. The How Money Really Works listeners. So that's about us for this episode. Before we go, Stephen, can you tell everybody where they can find us on social media?
Yes, so if you go to TikTok, we're on at How Money Really Works, and Instagram is at HMRW Pod. Yes, and also you're on Spotify and Apple. You Google the same thing, HMRW. How Money Really Works.
How Money Really Works indeed. Please do like us on Apple and Spotify. Leave a review if you can. If you've got any questions for us, drop them into those comments either on Apple or Spotify or on our social media accounts. We'll be back very soon with more about how money really works. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.